While we sleep, the guardians of the night take to the streets, having said goodbye to those they love. Each other knowing they may never say these words again, they face the evil that we run from. They dedicate their lives to those that would hate them because they wear the badge. They wear the badge not for the glory or recognition, but because they were born to honor the thin blue line. This is the LEO First Podcast. We'll talk to the men and women in law enforcement, those that have retired, and anyone who's impacted by law enforcement. We'll peel back the curtain, and you'll get the real stories. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Every law enforcement officer has a story to tell. Get ready to hear from the men and women who put their lives on the line every day for their communities and their country. Welcome to the LEO First Podcast. Now, here's your host, Michael Laidler.
Hey everybody, it's your host, Michael Laidler of the LEO First Podcast, and I'm excited. Well, I'm a little nervous too because this being a nice hot day in Texas and we're recording this early, I'm excited to be doing this podcast, but I don't know if I'm excited to go outside later. I know our guest and I was kind of talking, and as I think about it now, it's always interesting as the day progresses what happens, and we'll talk about kind of like that throughout the podcast, not necessarily about the weather, but how his career has progressed in the last 33 years. He has been in Missouri, Texas. He's been a chief of police. He's a founding member of the Curve. I don't know if you guys heard of the Curve yet, but it's that little thing that Simon Sinek, you know, the guy that writes a couple of books and is a really good speaker. He has partnered with him on that. He's been writing and has written articles for Police One. He's working for Lexipol. I mean, he's doing it all. He has a doctorate degree. So I can tell you guys, the person you're about to hear from in our show today is going to be a blessing. It's going to be a gift. It's going to be a treat because whenever I get a chance to connect with people of his magnitude and we're able to share insight on humanizing the badge and how we're making this industry better, it's always good to have people that have been in it and they understand. Like I said, he started decades ago. I said 33 years, and he risen all the way to the ranks of chief. So needless to say, there's a few positions in between there, like captain and PIO, public information officer. So he could definitely understand what a lot of us have gone through and what we can go through. So without further ado, our guest today will be Doug Shoemaker. Doug, we're excited to have you. We're excited that you're giving us some of your time of your day. I know you recently, very recently, had a retirement. So you're definitely doing what a lot of people at the highest level are thinking about doing when it comes to retirement, but you didn't stop there. You're actually going with a company that's still going to promote this industry with the Curve. And I had a chance to listen to one of the podcasts you guys had or webinars that you had a couple of weeks ago with Will Gadara. Hopefully I said his last name right, which that podcast was amazing. And I'm just looking forward for you sharing some of your insight, what you have going on. Tell us a little bit about you, but just the floor is yours.
Yeah. So, well, first, thanks for having me. This is exciting. You've had some really great guests, so I have a really high standard to live up to. Some friends that might have been on your podcast, so keep doing the great work. Yeah, it's been a minute. It's been 33 years in policing, a little over. And through that, I was in the state capital of Missouri, Jefferson City, Missouri. And then I was chief in Grand Junction, Colorado, 4.5 years, and came to Texas and was the chief in Denton, Texas, and decided to call it a career after all those years. And you know, I think as I look back on my policing career, and you alluded to it, there's so many steps that go along the way, but there are so many important people throughout those steps that help you grow. And so I told you before we started the podcast, I'm really thankful for those people that gave me the grace and the latitude to grow, the mentors that really made a difference. And I think I've been really blessed. And I hope certainly that all your listeners have those same types of folks in their lives that can help them accomplish their goals and remember to pay it forward. And I think I've tried to do that in my career with the people, my colleagues that I've worked with. So it's been amazing, as you mentioned. Moving into the private sector, going to start working for Peregrine, a company based out of San Francisco next month. Super excited about them and the culture there and the amazing things they're doing in software and helping police and public safety agencies but I'm also getting to work more with the Curve and Simon, and that is truly an honor too. And Peregrine embraces that and loves that. So I really get the best of all worlds in this deal, and I'm really looking forward to the next stages of what's happening because the work with Simon in particular is so very important about culture, and I think we really need to address police culture in our organizations right now, not only locally but across the globe, because we're all seeing the same things.
And I love the fact that, especially from the highest level of an organization, and I forgot about the Colorado that you actually spent time there as well. But three things I know you said you really have been really strong with, and you teach it obviously in your time in IACP, where you spent over 17 years in that organization, was three areas that I know from just me speaking as a keynote speaker and speaking across the country and places like out of country as well, is you talk on three areas that keep popping up, and there's no quick fix, but there's strategies that you've learned over time, and that's retention, recruitment, and culture. How have you seen in your time through IACP as a chief, or even in your time with the Curve, how have you seen agencies that are strong in those categories versus not being strong? Like what kind of difference have you seen? Because I know it's measurable in some ways. So like, what is your research and data telling you about that?
I think for me, particularly when I became a police chief in Grand Junction and then taking that to Denton, Texas, where I most recently served, I think it really boils down to being able and open to understanding what the culture is and what we're about. Like, who are we specifically, and who do we want to be? And then that takes a little bit of vulnerability on the part of a command staff or a chief to say, all right, let's open ourselves up and ask people within our organization at all levels. It doesn't matter if you're sworn or non-sworn, professional staff. Everybody in that agency contributes at some level, and so I'm a fan of hearing voices within the organization about who do you think we are, and what's that look like not only to you, but how does that reflect to our external customer, which is the public that we serve. And so as we look at that cultural piece, that really loops into recruiting and retention, because if we don't know who we are, then the people that we're trying to hire are like, well, why you versus some other organization? So defining that brand, and by brand I don't mean logo, I mean what people think of when they think of XYZ police department.
Right.
Why them? And so that's a lot of work, and it's a very vulnerable position to be in, because sometimes you see or hear things that may not be the best things about the organization, but that allows you to at least understand them and then address them appropriately. But you also hear things that are really good about the organization that might really resonate throughout. And that's how you build that brand. And we've done it really successfully in Grand Junction. We did it really successfully in Denton. And when we revised our recruiting strategy, for example, we looked at certainly non-traditional recruiting videos. And believe me, I know recruiting videos aren't the end all be all of recruiting. They are one component, and if done right, they absolutely are a fantastic tool in the tool belt. And so we looked at doing something completely different. And in Grand Junction, we did exactly that. Our recruiting video was so different than anything else out. It wasn't the typical SWAT Metallica music playing, this kind of stuff. It wasn't the adrenaline pump stuff, because let's be honest, folks, that's not what we do all the time, and we do very little of that. Ours really focused on the organization, what we do on a daily basis, and then also who you could be when you're not policing, and it focused on the individual and the lifestyle and the life you'll have if you come to work for us. And it was wildly successful. We took that same concept to Denton, and it worked really well. We saw our numbers bump up quite a bit because it really resonated with people. Like, okay, that makes sense. We also took our recruiting strategies to make them much more customer focused and more individualized, and small things from, in a recent Police One article through Lexipol that I wrote, that was just published 2 days ago, talked about getting every level involved in that recruiting process, from the command staff going to the physical fitness testing and meeting each one of the applicants and saying, hey, where are you from? Thanks for coming. And just that personal touch really seemed to make a difference with people. The applicants to feel like, oh, well, I'm not just a number here. You kind of care about me being here. And I think we need to be better about that in this line of work. I understand with massive organizations, it's a little different story. Totally get it. But I also understand that there are times in recruiting where you can really make a difference in people, and say, hey, we're the department you should come to, and here's why. All of it boils down to culture, understanding who we are, what we're about, and where we want to be.
I'm gonna disagree on one part about the size of the agency dictating how much that leader can be out there, because if you truly want to grow, you have to make at least a day. I would say optimistically a month to get out to those recruiting events, get out to those physical fitness training, whatever it is, because if you are proclaiming that you want to have a strong culture, where does it start? I mean, it starts at the tip of the spear. And if you can't find time out of your day at some point throughout the month, throughout the quarter, at least throughout the year, to at least go to one or two events, then what does that say to everybody else? And I'm not saying that it's an easy task. I mean, Doug, you've been a chief at two different places. You know that what we say versus what we can implement are two different things. But I believe for a strong culture, at least in the area of recruitment specifically, if you want to show support, that the highest leaders, anybody in that command staff, they have to be consistently showing up, because people are locked. We're visual people. We're like you said, we're people. And if we don't see that support from the top, although they may not be involved in the technical side or the admin side, just them physically walking out there, shaking a few hands, that goes a far way. And then when people are thinking about staying, they're like, you know what? During the day my chief came, or the sheriff came, or the director came, they at least shook my hand. You know what? That might be the kind of agency that will help me out when I struggle, because in this industry we will struggle. So it's kind of like John Maxwell, he talks about it in one of his books. He talks about depositing money in a bank account and kind of putting things in there that are positive. So when you do have to take a withdrawal because something negative happened, like maybe a bad use of force or a citizen complaint, you've already said, okay, we have a culture where we're trying to help our people, not just beat them down as soon as it comes up. Because if you do something wrong, you got to be held accountable, but you don't want to feel like that's the only time you see the chief or the sheriff, the warden, whoever. You want to know that over time that this is part of the process. And as a leader, you're there for the good and the bad.
Yeah, I think point well taken. I think it's dramatically more difficult for people at that level. I think of Eddie Garcia in Dallas, and Mike Moore recently retired from LAPD, and I'm thinking, I don't know how they do what they do. And I've got just extreme level of appreciation for the work that both of them and many other major city chiefs have done, because there's so many things to balance, and there's so many things that are put on their plate that they don't. I mean, and many of those things they can't control just because of the political nature of the job and the position they're in. So, I know that I would bet if you sat down and asked me one of them, what would you like to be doing today? I'm betting pretty much all of them be like, I want to get in the car with a cop, and I want to
Right.
go and do the things, because that's the way they are. They're good people. So having been in mid-sized agencies for the most of my career, I've had that latitude. I do think it's important to know too, it's not just about those initial times when we get to meet with recruits or that process of recruiting. It's the follow-up, and it's making sure that we're not selling a false bill of goods. Like, oh, it's all shiny and pretty on the outside. And then once you get there, and in one organization I went to, that's exactly what happened. There was an organization, and some of the folks that had come there before, they said it was great when we were recruited, but afterwards it felt like we didn't matter as much. So we tried to really reverse that process to go, well, let's see where you can get involved, and let's see, because you've got all this value from this previous organization where you worked. How does that translate to working here, and how do we incorporate that? And so we started doing some things, and soon they felt more a part of the process, and they felt more welcomed. And I think you got to follow up on it. It can't just be words. This is not a used car sales show. This is a people's careers. This is their lives. This is a hard job. So let's not make it harder on them. Let's embrace them, and let's try and do the best job we can with them, and empower them to do their jobs, to make sure they feel safe to do that from the top down.
And I think that's an extremely important point. And that goes into the next step of, now you have them in the agency. How do you keep them? Well, retention is, you follow up. Like, you don't just sell the heavy metal promo video, recruitment video, where you're like, hey, every day you're going to be on the SWAT team. You're going to be barricading suspects. No, there's another side to this career that we have. So I know you guys are really pushing out curve. And obviously I definitely want to talk about it, because like I said, I was on that meeting and I loved it. How is Curve kind of promoting culture and retention through some of the principles that they have right now?
as we evolve the curve, and we started this back in 2020, right after George Floyd, we met in Colorado, and I think it was a moment where all of the chiefs and sheriffs that were there, along with Simon, it was almost cathartic just to talk through the challenges we were facing. And that first year, Simon is, as always, super gracious on everything he does. And we listened and we just talked through leadership and things that we were facing. And it's strange how oddly familiar and similar everything was with our challenges. And in the chief's position, it's difficult because you don't have somebody you can really talk to in the organization about the issues because you're the chief or you're the sheriff. So as we looked at the curve and it's evolved over the last 4 years, the movement is to really address some of those leadership issues at all levels within the organization, not only at the top, but the more we've had, like we've now had 2 webinars. There will be a conference this next year that's going to be probably in the Texas area that will bring people together. But we've also seen a lot of mid-level managers get really interested in this type of movement, this cultural movement.
Yes.
And even though, and I've been at every rank in the police organization, but I will still to this day swear that the two most important positions in the police department are the field sergeant or supervisor and the field training officer. It's not the chief, it's not the captain. Do we impact things? Absolutely. But these are the folks that are out doing the job on the daily. They set the tone, they set the culture in a lot of ways, and they have to be supported and empowered to do those jobs. And they can make or break an organization. And we've seen an incredible level of people at that level say and raising their hand and say, I love what you're talking about with assessing the culture I want in. And let's talk about how we can really do an internal assessment to see where we are and almost a checkup, like a health checkup within the organization. So I think people are hungry for that. And if you look at Simon's work through The Infinite Game or through Leaders Eat Last, those topics, yeah, they're fantastic books. Will's book is amazing. And you're thinking, why would unreasonable hospitality relate to policing? If you read the book and you watch the podcast, the episode, it all of a sudden really clicks as to exactly how we impact people on the daily in policing and how that relates to the service industry. So there are so many concepts that port over so very well that we don't accept sometimes because it's not in a quote unquote policing book. So I think people are hungry for more. And as the curve evolves, that's what we're doing. We're trying to address those types of things to really assess how do we keep the great people that we have? How do we keep them involved? How do we make sure they have a voice in the process? And how do we empower them to get to that next level? Because those are our future leaders. Those, as a chief, when I come in, my job is to leave it better than I got it. And you don't have control over that sometimes to an extent, but you also want to put people in place that can rise to that next level and it becomes a seamless process. And ultimately, you hope they do it better than you. So how do we make that happen?
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a millennial and I don't want to just be told to do something. I want to know a purpose behind it. I want to see growth. I want to see development. And if you start looking at some of the stats and some of the data, that's going to be the bulk of the workforce. So what we were using back in the day to help motivate people, I guess that's the best word to use, motivate them to listen, it's just not going to work. So you have to have these innovative strategies. And I completely agree. And like I told people early with your introduction, you have a doctorate for a reason. The field sergeant and the FTO are probably the most important. And you could translate to any industry, that first line supervisor or that trainer, they're the ones that are really going to promote the culture. So if we can really train them from the top to their positions, they're gonna be the ones that are the people highlighting the culture. They're gonna be the people marketing the culture because they're on the ground every day. So I think you definitely hit the nail on the head with those two positions. And anybody listening, if you're in any level of leadership or you're a line officer, those two positions, if you want to be impactful in your organization, become a training officer. If you want to be impactful supervisor, be good at being a first level supervisor because you are the one that are dealing with the people on the ground every day. And you're the one that also has to spread the message from leadership. So you have to be very strong in that area. So with that in mind, Doug, like I said, I talked to you before. I'm trying to keep the time as minimum as I can. So if people are looking to find you, where can they find you?
So most prominently on LinkedIn. I gave up Twitter some time ago because, politics and I don't do politics. So yeah, LinkedIn for me. And then soon I'll be working with Peregrine. And I'm, again, very excited to work with that amazing company. And then, of course, if you go to thecurve.org, You can find information about us there. And so I'm always happy to connect, always happy to answer questions and meet folks across the industry. Love supporting police. I'm very proud of what I did, very proud of the folks that I get to work with, and appreciate you and all your listeners and everything they do every day to help serve and protect the community. So happy to be here and happy to connect.
Thank you. Yeah. And I will tell you guys, I've been hounding Doug for about a year on LinkedIn. I finally broke through. I had to use some trickery and get with Chris, one of his partners and stuff like that. So he is active on LinkedIn. He does a great job. And I love what I saw with some of the promotions and recruiting. That's what drew me to you through your LinkedIn page. So if you are not connected with him, guys, make sure that you connect and you see some of the things he has done, and be on the lookout for things that he's doing with some of the organizations that he's working with. And obviously, I checked out the curve.org. I was impressed with that as well. So I can tell you those are at least minimum two platforms that I have seen Doug that he's thriving for already. So, Doug, any final words?
More to come, and very excited about the future. Proud to have served. Anything I can do to support my colleagues, women and men that go out and do the work on the daily, I'm here, and love you all.
You hear that, guys? Hey, he's still passionate about it, and he wants to see all of us grow and see you grow. So when you're looking for, specifically in these areas, and I know he could talk about it much more, but if you're looking for help in retention, recruitment, culture, he's one of the guys that I would recommend, because obviously 33 years means something. It ain't like he said 3 years. And if you're 3 years in, doesn't mean you can't be impactful, but 33 years gives you a little bit of wisdom, especially when you've worked for more than one agency. He's worked in 3 different states. So let's give him the man the credit that he deserves and all the work he's done. So Doug, thank you for the time. And folks, if you haven't had a chance, make sure you're checking out our show on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, sharing the post. Anything that you see come up with me or Doug, make sure you guys put it out there, because we want to spread messages like this, because we always complain that we don't have enough of this. So these are opportunities to know that, or situations where we know there's resources out there for you guys, especially because we know recruitment and retention is not getting any better in law enforcement. So everything we can use to our advantage, let's do it through a podcast like this, the programs Doug have going on, and let's use it to our advantage. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for commenting and sharing different information. But if you guys need anything else, reach out. If not, you guys be safe and have a great day.
You've been listening to the LEO First Podcast. Michael has been in law enforcement since 2005. He's worked for 3 law enforcement agencies in 3 different states. He's a professional speaker who travels the country teaching about leadership development and self-awareness. And he's the author of a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge: The 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. It's Michael's passion to bring law enforcement members' stories to the front, so you get the real and raw take. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Michael on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Michael Laidler, on Twitter at Michael A. Laidler, on Facebook at Michael Laidler Leadership. Send an email to michael@michaellaidler.com and hit the website at michaellaidler.com. See you next time on the LEO First Podcast.
Like that, I'm gonna be leaving a note. Find vehicle, advising,